Begin formally, welcome all of you to today's session by Kashf initiative on writing and publishing a journal article. While of course we have a panelist who will take you through the overview of the session, I quickly want to talk about Kashf initiative, and before we begin, let me just introduce Kashf to those of you who are joining us for the first time. I believe many new faces that we're seeing today, which is great. Kashf Initiative is a non-profit initiative of researchers from South Asia. We're based at different universities like University of Oxford, Cambridge, Edinburgh, JNU, DU, among others. The space is dedicated to making research and learning in social sciences and humanities more accessible, especially for learners in non-metropolitan regions or from underserved institutions. Now that we look back on how far we have come since the launch this year, we realized that Kashf, our work, began with a simple observation, really, that some of the most foundational skills in humanities and social sciences, like how to read a text closely, how to think methodologically, or how to ask sharp questions, are often sidelined in our pedagogy. And many of us have felt this gap firsthand as we moved to different universities, to different countries. So Kashf is a small but deliberate attempt to respond to this. It's a space for pause, for returning to the fundamentals, not as a remedial step, but as a way of honoring the labor of thought. A reminder that scholarship can still be slow, generous, and yet meaningful. So far, starting from January, we've hosted free informative and training sessions, up to 16 in number, sometimes multiple in a month, covering everything from basics of research to writing a proposal, to doing literature review, to learning referencing. We've also hosted writing workshops and hosted some special workshops with seminar forums in universities like University of Oxford. And to reach more learners, we've started offering sessions in regional languages like Odia, Malayalam, Hindi. We're also launching one in Marathi this month, hopefully. We've also recently rolled out 2 more pillars, a reading pillar with the first reading group beginning in August. In fact, it's starting tomorrow, where some professors will guide us through original text. We'll learn how to read original text. The first cohort will be led by Dr. Krishnaswamy Dara. He's the author of the book, The Idea of Minority in Ambedkar's Thought, Equality, and Differential Rights. We've also successfully released our writing pillar, the first writing vertical for researchers with caregiving duties and responsibilities. So if you want to set aside a dedicated time for writing and have caregiving responsibilities, please feel free to sign up for the writing pillar. If you know someone who has caring responsibilities and is struggling to make time for writing, do direct them to this. I'll put the links to all of these pillars and sessions in the chat box. There's much more to come, and if you think a session or a topic or a collaboration is possible, do let us know, and we'll do our best to make it happen. You can also subscribe to our mailing lists to get all the updates. I'll leave all the links in the chat box for you. And with that, we move further in this session to introducing our panelists. We're very happy, and it's a pleasure to introduce all of you to our wonderful panelists today, who also have had the privilege and the opportunity to know in personal capacity. Jasmin, we're very happy to welcome you today. So Jasmin or Hafiz is the editorial assistant at the EPW, Economic and Political Weekly, the famous journal as far as South Asia is concerned. She has a master's in international development and has been a Commonwealth scholar at the University of Oxford. With that, I hand over to you, Jasmin. Please feel free to take the stage over. All yours.
Thanks a lot, Sana, for your warm welcome. It's also a pleasure to know you and meet you after so long also online. I hope I'm audible well, and thank you for everyone who has joined as well. I will try my best to run you through what I, as an editor and as a reviewer at EPW, feel that are some of the important considerations in publishing. Especially from the perspective of a reviewer who reads through multiple articles and papers across different categories, and what often works and what are often flagged as problems or issues for rejection. I think so. I've prepared a PPT and I'll try to walk you through that. But also, as the session is organized, we'll also have an interactive session, and maybe a lot of the interesting discussion will come out in the interaction itself. I'll just try sharing my PPT. Just. Okay. I hope this is visible to everyone. Perfect. All right. So, just a brief idea of what all we'll be covering in this session. I'll also try to keep it within half an hour, but Sana, you can remind me if I'm going overboard also. So yeah, so a couple of important considerations, starting with the fundamental question of knowing what you are writing as an author, also contribution and what a research paper means generally for somebody who's reviewing it, and a couple of other common considerations in writing. Yeah, so I think the first primary question consideration that you must have when you are writing an article, and this is across articles. So I work at EPW, where papers are not the only kind of things that are published. There are articles also and that come under different categories, but of course they're different from articles that may come in other platforms. So writing itself varies across different platforms and different publications. Writing styles and writing types vary. So I think one of the most important questions to ask yourself is to know what you are writing, and is to ask yourself whether this is the right platform for your writing. So if you're submitting it to, say, a newspaper, is a newspaper the right venue for that kind of writing? Or is EPW the right venue? Or is another journal better for it? So knowing what is the right platform would be important. Second, I think it's also important for you to know whether the journal has already published something on the same topic. And very often the case is that when the journal has published, especially recently, covering same issues, the chances for rejection of an article is higher because it's already been discussed. Why do we need to devote more space for discussing the same topic? So it's always nice to go through the journal. I know a lot of journals are paywalled and you might not be able to access everything. There might still be ways to sort of violate the paywall and get access to more articles. But also, even if you go through the abstract and the title, you'll get an idea of what has been covered already. Thirdly, also check the submission guidelines of the platform that you are submitting to, and or notes for contributors, which will most likely have very detailed notes on what works for the journal, what are the kind of articles that goes in there. Also, what are the kind of article categories, and where, what is the word limit, and all of that will be given. So it's also important to know that, and present your article for a particular category. So if I might say, just an example, so EPW, for instance, commentary is a 2,000 to 3,000 word article that mostly deals with topical issues or engages with current discourse and things like that. But there's another category called perspectives, which is also article, not papers. But perspective, for instance, it's a longer piece, 4,000 or 5,000 word piece that also brings a new perspective on an already discussed topic, or a more scholarly perspective on something. So you might also want to figure out what category works best for your article, and submit it to that category. Now, I think this is also very important to know, and this is something that I personally come across a lot during review, where knowing the kind of writing that you're doing and the kind of platform that you have submitted to that writing. So there are different types of formal or academic writing. So you can write for an article, you can write as an op-ed, it can be a paper, it can be a policy brief, it can be a report. And each of these have different demands. Each of these satisfy different demands also. And different platforms are better for each. Say it could be a journal, something might be better suited for a newspaper, something might be better suited for a government publication. So you have to know the demands of each of these. And just to briefly say again, articles like, for instance, what comes out in EPW mostly, and a couple of other platforms, I think India Forum, Ideas for India, most of these are on policy, similar issues. So there you see short pieces that are 2000 to 3000 words each, or 4000 or whatever. And those are mostly analytical arguments, analytical articles on an issue. So you're not just simply discussing, you're discussing it from a more research or theoretical or argumentative perspective, where so analytical pieces, and it can be both on topical issues or on other issues as well. So something that's currently happening in the current affairs discourse could be one thing or another one, but mainly it has a bit more research value, it has a bit more analytical value than, say, an op-ed. Now, op-ed is usually something that comes in the middle page of the newspaper. Now, op-eds are generally, one, they're shorter. They're like 800 to 1000 words. And a lot of times they are summary arguments on an issue. Say, for example, gender gap in education. So gender gap in education, they will present some data on gender gap. It's also argumentative or persuasive. They're saying, so see, this gender gap exists and we need to solve it. And maybe 5-6 measures should be taken. So this is the general structure of an op-ed. Now, a lot of times what happens is you get op-ed type articles for like when I'm reviewing for EPW, a lot of op-ed type articles come for commentaries, which then usually get rejected because that is not the kind of article you would want for a platform like EPW or another similar platform that engages with a bit more research and analysis. So say same topic, if you are writing as a more analytical piece, you would go into the different dimensions of the gender gap. You would try to theorize it. You would try to present new empirical insights. It's also longer, so you have more space to present the argument. So overall, it's a more scholarly contribution than an op-ed. Now, so if you are writing an op-ed, then you might want to consider a newspaper as a publication platform. Now, the third kind of pieces that often come in is report style pieces, which I think you're often, it comes as a sort of writing mistake from people where, you know, you're more focused, the article is more focused on, say again, something on gender, but you are elaborating, you're just summarizing the present situation on gender. Say, okay, so and so is what is there in education. And then you are listing down all the policies that the government has taken. And then you're giving some final policy recommendations. So which again, and this can happen on a lot of topics where it reads more like a report than a commentary or an analytical article. So you're stating something that is known, or you're presenting some data that is already out there in the domain. You're not presenting new data, you're presenting data that's already available, that's already well known. Then you are describing some policies, then you're describing, okay, now you need to take these measures, and then you conclude. So again, there is no new contribution by say. It's mostly a summary, it's mostly tabling whatever is there on an issue, which again, it's better suited as a report often than as an analytical piece. Another type of writing again is anecdotal or journalistic writing, again, better suited for other platforms. Then you have papers, which obviously research papers are in-depth papers that systematically present research, original research, and present new kinds of contributions. So that's another type of art category. And then another type of articles that also often come in is survey evidence or field notes. I think some journals often have field notes. So if you're going to the field, collecting some data, then you can also present that data as a short piece. Again, survey evidence also presentation depends upon whether the journal accepts such pieces. So you might also, so some journals, for instance, have a separate category called notes from the field or things like that, which present short, data that researchers have collected from the field. So you might want to check which journals might prioritize such kinds of data. But also as a reviewer, one thing I have felt is that when you're presenting survey evidence, you also want evidence that is interesting from the perspective of a journal. So, for instance, you're saying education outcomes in a village in UP. So that is your particular research, and you have some data, and your article presents that data in forms of pie chart or table or whatever. But as a reviewer, the first question that I often ask myself, and like a lot of the other reviewers also ask, is it presenting new data? As in, is it presenting any new interesting insights? Or is it just confirming what we already know about education in UP? So that is a consideration for a lot of journals. So journals often work with limited space, and they also have print constraints and all that. So often the question is, what is new? Why do we want to read this, right? Why would somebody else want to read this if we publish it on our platform? So even if you're presenting survey evidence, I think there are two things. One, the evidence itself has to be interesting, and maybe, so if it's education in a UP village, are you finding something new? Are you finding some interesting relations happening at the village level? Or are you just saying, okay, literacy rate is this much, or gross enrollment is this much, or this is the gender gap, which we don't necessarily want that data. I mean, it's not that we don't want that data, but it's in the sense it's a very specific data also. It's limited to a particular village in the UP. I mean, in UP. So the question would be, why would a larger audience want to go through it? You can make a larger audience go through it. That's also the thing. So it also depends upon how you present that data also. So if you're able to connect trends that you're observing on ground with larger political or things that are happening around, or policy discourses, or connect it to some relevant discourse that's happening, or some theoretical or analytical contributions you can make, then that evidence is valuable for somebody to read. So it also depends upon how you present it. But yes, so this is also one kind of writing that's often accepted in journals, and one you may want to consider. Now, common considerations that that we think about in the review process, and common put-offs for a reviewer. One is that often you get like 10-page articles, sometimes 20, 30-page articles, but often in a few pages, you can realize if you want to continue reading this, or if it is making important contributions. So it's important that that you present the article so, and especially it's a couple of the first few pages that a reviewer might be going through, so that they also understand that this is, there's something that the paper is trying to say. Another put off that I was saying was, of course, confusing writing types. So you're submitting an op-ed, or something that's report style or descriptive, without any new contribution. So you have to know what the particular journal works on, what kind of work that it publishes. Another important thing that we notice in a lot of articles is repeating what is already well known. So again, articles or whatever piece that you're submitting to a journal, or any platform for that matter, it should basically make the reviewer or the journal understand what it is questioning. Just a second. Yeah. So yeah, repeating what is already well known is one problem. So you're saying, for example, again, something on demographic dividend in India. Now, demographic dividend in India, you're just summarizing what is demographic dividend, what the current data shows, what are some challenges that India faces in terms of demographic dividend, what are some policy measures. Now, this is something most people know, right? This is there. I mean, even if most people don't know, this is already available in public discourse. This is there. Everybody's discussing. Everybody knows that this is easily accessible. So you don't want a piece that is repeating something that's already established, already well known. You want something that is contributing to the discourse. Second is again summary or surface level arguments, which again might work for some types of writing, but often in journals or in research publications, it might not be sufficient. So again, just to say an example, so demographic dividend, a summary or surface level engagement with the question would be just presenting, okay, so and so is demographic dividend. What does the current data show? What is now challenges India is facing in terms of demographic dividend? And then some conclusions. But what is a more scholarly engagement with it would be, are there any new analytical insights in demographic dividend? Are you bringing in new ways of thinking about demographic dividend? Are you questioning the idea? Are you presenting new dimensions of thinking about it? Are you presenting demographic dividend in terms of something that's happening recently, say demographic transition and delimitation? So something that's ongoing right now is often something that journals publish very often, because whenever a current discourse is going on, it's always nice to have an article on it. So are you able to relate it to what is happening currently? So that's one issue. Another issue would be repeating a problem statement. So sometimes entire articles are about establishing a certain problem is there, and establishing a problem that's also well known. So for example, malnutrition. Now again, you are spending 3,000 words saying and repeating malnutrition. So this is malnutrition, this is malnutrition, this problem exists, but also you're not providing again relevant arguments or new data or different dimensions, different ways of thinking about malnutrition, or how do you address it? What kind of policy measures are needed? So that kind of an engagement has to come beyond just saying, okay, this is the problem. And I'm not saying there's an issue with stating a problem. Of course, a lot of articles, a lot of times are bringing in problems or problematizing issues. That's perfectly fine, but it cannot be a problem that's already well known and everybody knows that this is a problem. So you don't necessarily need to persuade people into recognizing this is a problem. There are problems where you may have to persuade people. So there you might have to spend time in the problem statement. But yeah, so recognizing that is important. Again, survey data, which I already mentioned, say health outcomes in UP or education outcomes in UP, without which again confirms with knowledge that we already have, confirms with data that exists, but doesn't present new insights. Now, another thing is case studies. So often what you see is some articles say they say universal basic income. So the article itself is on universal basic income. And then it says, okay, so this is the situation of universal basic income. Now I am going to analyze universal basic income in Uttarakhand. Now, as a reviewer, you want to know why you are choosing Uttarakhand. What is the relevance of Uttarakhand here? Why I want to know why not another state? What is different about Uttarakhand? I mean, basically, why are you choosing that? Is that justification for you choosing that as a case study important? I mean, is that sufficient justification, or are you presenting that case in order to make a point? Are you presenting any new, maybe some contradictions you're presenting from a particular state, or maybe some confirmations of existing pattern? But there has to be a reason why you're using a particular case, and that reason should be justifiable enough from the perspective of contribution, from the perspective of new insights, and all of that. So oftentimes there are papers or articles where you present an overall issue and then you narrow it down to a particular case, but without enough justification, that sometimes you don't understand what the point the paper is making in the end. So that is also something you want to consider. Yeah, another important, very, very important thing is contribution. I think this is the most important consideration in review. You're always looking at what the paper is saying. What is it contributing? Is it filling a particular gap in our existing knowledge? Why should somebody read it? Why should I read it? Why should I make another person read it? So it can be topical contribution to an ongoing discourse, which is something very often like platforms like EPW or even other, like, I mean, India Forum and some of the other platforms also, and most platforms, in fact, apart from papers, they're also looking at articles that can contribute to ongoing discourse, say farmers' prices or, vote bandi or whatever. So some ongoing discourse, are you contributing to that discourse? That's an important, that can be an important contribution. Second, is there an analytical contribution, any new way of thinking or any new theory, any analytically, are you providing new ways of thinking about an issue? Theoretically, empirically, are you providing new data on a particular issue? Are you challenging ways of thinking? So always you're looking at what an article is contributing to. So it can be about gender, but what within there? What is the argument you're bringing in? So you cannot, it cannot be repetition something you already know. So this is now what is briefly about other kinds of articles that are published. But now I think mainly coming to research papers, again, one of the important things is understanding the idea of research in research papers. Oftentimes what happens is the research paper might often, lose its purpose as a contribution of, as something that contributes to original research. So understanding the purpose of papers as something that brings out systematic original research on an issue. Again, not a repetition of what is already known and not a descriptive summary of a discourse. Say, for example, determinants of farmers' income. So there are, and then you go for 7,000 words descriptively detailing what are the determinants of farmers' income. There you might be making a couple of interesting points, but in the in that kind of descriptive summary where a lot of the points might already be known. So farmers' income, say, okay, crop productivity, this. But there's no, again, or say marine fish, say, again, marine fisheries, some challenges in marine fisheries, then 7,000 words on challenges in marine fisheries. So that's all. Those are more descriptive articles that are not necessarily research papers. They might work well as articles of 2,000, 3,000 words that are presenting a problem or arguing for a certain thing. But yeah, should be wary about presenting what is not a research paper as a research paper. I think in papers, often two good things to ask yourself would be, do you actually need 7,000 or 8,000 words to explain this topic? Very often, or explain your arguments, do you need these many words? Very often what we come across is that a lot of papers that are 7,000 words may actually only have content of 2,000 words, in which case you can actually summarize it to a 2,000 word piece. It's a short article, but which has been stretched to a 7,000 word research paper. So you really don't need that many words to explain what you are explaining. So it's always good to ask yourself whether you want more words. More words doesn't mean anything for a journal, and it also doesn't mean anything for a review. It just means you're going through more. So you can also pick up when you are saying an argument and when you're also just filling in gaps between arguments. Second thing also is, are you arriving at commonsensical conclusions from your research? I think that's also an important thing, because sometimes papers say do some complicated maths and some data and all, and finally they end up with the conclusion that yes, gender inequality exists. This is the final conclusion of the paper. That cannot be your conclusion, because everybody who's, like a child who's born knows that gender inequality exists. So your research paper cannot arrive at a very commonsensical conclusion that is already well known and well established. So the purpose of it is to provide new knowledge. So that's also something you want to consider. Again, common mistakes in research papers, one is that sometimes there is no engagement with literature itself. Which is again very, very important. You have to know what has already been done in your in the topic that you are looking at, and where you are situating your research. So only if you know literature can you situate your research within that literature and say, this is the gap I am filling within that literature. So you have to engage with works that have been previously published in your topic. A second common mistake is, and this often happens in economics, is data analytics is very nice, very strong, but the theory is extremely weak. So very often papers are what you call as results driven, which is you present some nice econometrics and all of that. But when you look back at the economic and from the econometrics, you make certain conclusions and say, oh, this causes this. But in on ground, these processes may not be so, or the theoretical relationship between the variables you're proposing might be very weak. And very often reviewers can understand that also. So even if you say you're doing stellar max and new econometrics and new methodology, sometimes when the basic simple theory of how these variables relate to each other is weak, papers may be rejected. Again, what I mentioned earlier, you're using some complicated maths, or even not even complicated, but if you're getting some data and you're working on that data, but you are establishing only simple common sense that everybody knows. So that also is not a good contribution as far as a paper is concerned. Another mistake that often happens is people conflate correlation with causation in papers, which again is overstretching your claims, right? Say, for example, you're saying in districts with more private schools, you're finding from your data that in districts with more private schools, students are scoring higher on average. So that is your finding. But from that finding, you're arguing that, okay, so if you open more private schools, it will improve outcomes everywhere. So your conclusion is, your policy recommendation is open private schools everywhere. And now this is a very simple example, but a lot of times people do conflate correlation with causation. And overstretch the policy recommendations that they're making, overstretch the kind of arguments that they're putting forward. So, so here in this case, for example, the problem is in districts with more private schools, there may be other reasons why students are scoring better on average. The students themselves might be more studious, or they may come from higher social or economic backgrounds, where parents may be more supportive, where there may be other resources, where there may be private coaching, private tuition, a lot of other factors may be causing it. So you have to know what your paper is claiming. This is extremely important. You should know what you are claiming and what you are not claiming. And you have to be very frank with what you are not claiming also. So that is one thing. Now, another, I think this is something I come across papers very regularly, not just people, like articles also, where your methodology is not elaborated appropriately. So this especially happens when you are, say, measuring certain key terms, like you're looking at marriage penalties and its impact on something, or gender-based violence. You're analyzing gender-based violence from a survey of women working in a certain area. Or you're looking at women's decision-making based on their financial independence. Now, in your methodology, you have to define what these terms exactly mean in your research, not in general, but what are you measuring? So what does marriage penalty mean for you? What are the variables that you're measuring? So gender-based violence, for example, can mean it's a broad term, right? But when you go on ground and do a field survey among women, what is it that you're categorizing as gender-based violence? What are you asking these women? What kinds of violence are you classifying as gender-based violence? So these definitions of certain key terms in your methodology have to be analyzed, have to be elaborated properly so that the reviewer knows that this is what is being measured. The reader also has to know this is what is exactly being measured, especially terms like these are very ambiguous, right? There's no universal definition or universal way of measuring these things. So you have to provide appropriate definitions of the key terms or the key variables in your study. And sometimes you might also have to provide questionnaires for that, so that the reader also knows that these are the things that are being measured. Say a lot of times you're building a composite index of something, say independence. But very often a lot of papers do not describe what are the variables that go into this index, or within those variables, what are you measuring to go into this index. So only if you know that can the reviewer also judge the methodology. Only then can the reviewer also know that, okay, these are the things, this is what's happening in the paper. So you need to know that also. So always elaborate your methodology appropriately. And another mistake is where results are presented without any analysis or engagement with theory. So you just present from a particular data analysis, say you present, okay, this is what you're finding out. But very often you stop there without analyzing it in the context of recent debates, or in the context of topical issues, or in the context of theory, or with previous literature. So you have to always analyze your results. You cannot stop at just presenting the data results. Another common issue then is repetitions and redundancies in articles and papers. And this is also commonly picked up in review as well as editing, where when an argument is being repeated many times in many different ways without making new points. So when you are while writing, it's very common to have repeat yourself multiple times. But when you do your editing, it's important to weed out such repetitions. So identify where you are saying the same things again and again and weed them out. Also, redundancies are also often there in both articles and papers, where, say, for example, you're talking about gender inequality. Sorry, I'm stuck myself on gender for some reason, but say gender inequality in the Northeast. And then you begin by saying Northeast geographical features, Northeast diversity, and all of that is not required for an article. So sometimes, history of some other place. So a lot of times people go on tangents and present some unnecessary contextualization. You only need as much context as required to understand the argument you are presenting. Beyond that, that's a different topic. So you don't need such redundant portions in your article. Also, don't go off a tangent and start discussing something else and then come back also. So it's often a coherence or a logical flow in your arguments is always appreciated in both reviewing and editing, where, if an article follows a logical jump, so you're not randomly jumping from one to another, but you start from, you have an introduction and then you go to the body where each point is connected. So often people use connectors between paragraphs, right? Where can you use although dash 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 what you've mentioned previously is there, but then this is also so sometimes if you think in terms of connectors, you might be able to logically organize your article better. But yeah, the arguments should also flow logically. Now, structuring a paper. Okay, quickly just wrapping up. So structuring a paper, sometimes outdated structures are followed. I think I also remember learning it in my school to organize the papers. Introduction, then you have a rationale, then you have objectives, 1, 2, 3, these are your objectives, then data, then methodology, then some subheadings and conclusions. This is an outdated structure. So if you look at papers that are being published now, nobody follows this, especially this rationale. Also research gap, sometimes you put a title called research gap and then objectives. So this is generally not required. So if you can check out any paper that comes in one of the good journals these days, what happens is you have an introduction that contextualizes the debate, contextualizes what you are saying, and then generally you move to a literature review. So sometimes people have a separate section called literature review. Sometimes literature review is integrated within within different subheadings of papers. So it can be so the general structure these days, so I'm especially highlighting these sections. So you don't need objectives. you should mention your objectives in your paper. You should also mention your rationale and your research gap and what you're trying to do and your literature review. All of this should be there. But in terms of organization, you don't need a separate section titled rationale or a separate section titled objectives. You can just integrate it into your introduction itself. And then go to your literature review or go to the body of your article. And it's always best to check out a few recent papers. Now, abstract is also very important in your article because this is often the first thing that reviewers go through. A reader also goes through the abstract first and often decides whether they want to read your paper. So abstract is the place where you actually sell your paper. Now, it's a very short brief, usually I think around 120 words, or even lesser sometimes. Short brief of the core points that your article or your paper is presenting. Now, these are the most important points that your article is presenting. And this is important to note because you have to also stick to what your abstract claims. Say there are certain papers, abstract and in fact what your title claims. So one common mistake also which happens is, say you say in your abstract you mention you will explore the barriers to accessing health. And then in your paper or in your article, you discuss the barriers only as one final paragraph. Or, in one line or two lines, you discuss your barriers, which then is pretty disappointing because then, somebody who's reading it might be going to check what the barriers are, but you're only explaining the barriers in one or two sentences. So it's not important to your article. You can present it, but that's not, it's of a footnote kind of importance in your article. So it's best not to present such less important claims in your abstract. And abstract gives an idea of what your article or your paper is mainly trying to do. So it should have the most important things that you're trying to present, and it should give a brief summary to a reader that this is what you're trying to do. Now, introduction also, it's a meaningful contextualization of a topic. And oftentimes what happens is sometimes in introductions, people present, again, dictionary definitions, say, for example, women empowerment. Then they go into presenting, oh, this is empowerment. This is social empowerment is this, economic empowerment meaning is this, psychological empowerment meaning is this. So so again, the problem with that is for a topic like empowerment, which is common parlance and which everybody knows and which is very easily, it's there in public discourse, you don't necessarily want these definitions for the reader. I mean, the reader doesn't necessarily want these textbook definitions. So what the introduction is looking for is a meaningful contextualization of the topic. So are you engaging with literature on empowerment, or things like so? So an introduction is basically setting the context of your paper, and also briefly, often introductions also briefly say what the paper is trying to do. So it should contribute to the discussion. It needn't start with such kinds of redundant definitions. It can come to the point and present crisp arguments of what you're trying to do in a topic. Literature review, again, as I said, is very important. Again, identifying what is relevant in the literature review is also important. Say, empowering women in marine fisheries. Now, sometimes what people do is they look at literature review, literature in empowerment, then literature in marine, marine activities, and then in fisheries. And so different works that have been done in empowerment then in marine fisheries are presented without a connecting link. Your literature review is basically, it's not literature on the keywords, it is literature on what you are doing. It is literature on what, so if you are looking at a particular thing in marine fisheries, it is literature on that particular area as a whole that you want to engage with. What are the papers that have previously engaged with, say, technology that women are using in marine fisheries? What have papers identified? what are they saying, what have they not identified, and that is where you situate your paper, that these are the things that have been done, but this has not been done, so that is the gap that I'm trying to fill. So that is the purpose of a research paper. And it is a good literature review engages with concepts and debates, and it's always best to not be oblivious to literature. So it's always when articles go for peer review, often reviewers mention, you have to mention these papers that have come out in this particular topic, which is very important. You cannot miss these papers. It's okay sometimes to miss it, but yeah, you cannot yeah. See, the purpose of a literature review is also to know the limits of what you are claiming, right? So you cannot be claiming that, oh, I am the first one doing this, I'm bringing this, I'm doing this. So that is also the purpose of literature review. So sometimes, so it is important that you, when you do your research, also engage with previous literature and present that in your paper as well, which is then followed by the body of your paper, which has appropriate headings, subheadings. Also, if it's presenting empirical research, that discussion, conclusions, appropriate sections. Language. So academic language generally requires a formal language. Now I'm just presenting one small example here, which is, so now this is not a big problem. Again, often this can be corrected in the editing stage if arguments make sense. So, but still, just as an example, so here, this is a paragraph about caregiving. Now it says biology would covers pregnancy and childbirth, but the entire burden of childcare is disproportionately borne by women. So that's all fine. But look at the remaining arguments where you're saying, and this is not something that is new or has arisen out of political economy. It has existed through time, surpassing systems across generations, passes on from mother to daughter. One thing that becomes clear is there's a lot of repetition here. So it is not something new. It has existed through time. It has manifested across generations. It is passing from mother to daughter. So same idea is being conveyed in 4 different phrases and lines. So you don't need this much repetition. Also, in an academic paper, an academic language would sort of cut this short and say mostly the burden of childcare is disproportionately borne by women. And this has been a historical system that has been transmitted through societies and generations, and that's it. You don't need more rhetorical arguments about it being passed through mother and daughter. It has existed through time and all of that. So this is an argument that you might say when you are speaking or you're trying to convince a person of a certain thing. But you can cut this short and come to the point in an academic argument, removing the rhetorical parts of it. Language, always best to have clear and accessible language. You don't need unnecessary jargon. It is also very, very difficult for editors to go through unnecessary jargon. It is very difficult to edit such papers, and nobody thinks this is nice. Everybody is very tired of papers with jargon. Because you also have to understand what the paper is saying. So it's always best to write in very simple, clear language. And another thing is when sometimes papers, a lot of abbreviations, articles might use abbreviations. It's best to avoid them judiciously. I mean, use them judiciously, because a lot of abbreviations may be confusing. Say you say global value chain GVC, then some other thing you're putting it as GMC, then this is interchangeably, this is the same thing. So GVC, GMC, you're saying it continuously throughout the article, and by the end the reader is thinking, I've not understood a thing, because it confuses reading. It makes reading very dense. So it's nice to remove abbreviations, unnecessary abbreviations. Again, maintaining the coherence and flow is important. Avoid randomly jumping between ideas. And if you struggle with language, that's actually perfectly fine. As long as you are making good arguments, you are presenting data, you're presenting a point, you're making a point, your papers will be accepted. So nobody actually rejects papers based on poor language. because editors are always willing to work on that language and modify that language. And I mean, modify it in the sense, correct it where necessary. But papers are rejected because the ideas or the way the arguments are presented is a problem, and not necessarily because the language has problem. So yeah, so that is something you can always feel confident about your language. You don't need to feel underconfident about presenting an argument because your language isn't perfect. Formatting, again, best to always follow the journal's particular style. If you go to the website, you can see what the style sheet is, what are the kind of things. So that's where references and all of that come. So each journal will have a particular way of referencing. APA or Chicago or EPW has its own style. So always go through the style sheet of the journal to understand what they want. Also, again, footnotes versus endnotes. So some journals, again, puts footnotes, which comes at the end of each page, versus endnotes that come at the end of your article. Again, these are also things that can be corrected in editing, so don't have to worry too much, but it's always appreciated when you stick to formatting. Tables and figures, again, one is to use it judiciously, because one, it can be very confusing if there are a lot of tables, both for the reader to understand and also from the perspective of journal's space. Um, so, uh, so each journal, especially if it's a print journal, it has page limitations. It cannot print beyond a certain limit. So it's always good to use tables and figures appropriately and judiciously, not overdo them, but also they need to be self-explanatory. So the title needs to be complete. Every table figure needs to have a source where it is important. I mean, where necessary. If you're using abbreviations in tables and figures, give that below the table as a note. Because the thing is, often tables and figures are also picked up by other researchers and used, right? So in other articles or in other papers also, they use it citing your paper. But then if they're using it like that, it has to be fully self-explanatory. So make it self-explanatory. Also, headings and subheadings also appropriately you want to divide. And this especially for commentaries, even like book reviews that come in, it's also always nice to categorize them into subheadings. Now, I think this is okay. The final thing is practical, some practical considerations. One is that the publishing process is very, very, very slow. Journals have space, also word limits, also manpower limits, but mainly space and word limits. So even if you're working beyond a pace, the journal will have to publish. So the process is very slow. So it might test your patience a lot. And also, one thing to understand is revisions. When journals request revisions from you, it's usually a good sign that they're considering your paper and they just need you. And it mostly actually means that they just need you to work through these revisions, and then it would be fine. So when you get revisions, it usually means it's good. So you can work through those revisions. Also, when you send your articles in, you can attach a short cover letter. Doesn't have to explain so much, but just presenting, just basic salutations and all of that, and saying you're submitting it for so and so. And again, understanding the journal and whether your topic fits into this journal. So those would be some things. I think that would be it from my end. I don't know if I've covered everything, but I think the rest we can also leave for audience questions. I'd be happy to take up.
Thank you, Jasmine. You can end the screen share. I'm gonna put you on. Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much, Jasmine, for that very, very comprehensive, in-depth discussion on what to do, what not to do, how to write a journal, how to, the considerations of publishing one. I've already had some questions in the DM directed to me, but you can also see the questions in the chat box. Okay, they started flooding. So if you want to ask your questions, either if you're comfortable asking it directly to the speaker, you can raise your hands, or else you can just keep dropping them in the chat box. We do have some questions in the chat box, and we'll start taking them. But thank you so much for the audience staying with us throughout the session. It's great, despite the festivities back home. All right, we'll take the first question. It's from Sujan. I'm taking the chat box from the chat box first. What is the most effective approach to preparing references and citations manually or by using reference management softwares? And I just to add to this, this is a problem which has stayed throughout, right? When you were speaking, I was thinking of the things that I also have kind of done wrong. So referencing, because every journal requires you to reference, tailor reference basically, and that is when the process gets tedious for us, because so each time we are revising the citations more than the arguments. So yeah, just to kind of add to that. Yes, Jasmine.
Yeah, I think I don't know if I can answer that effectively because I myself have not gone through using a reference management software. So, but yeah, whatever is easier for you, really. Again, often editors are also willing to. I mean, my job as an editor, I I modify references of every paper that I'm working on. So that work comes on us, but I mean, whatever is easier for you to navigate in terms of, again, as what Sana said, managing the different citation styles of each paper. Ultimately, it's just submitting if you can in the appropriate format, but even if you're not able to, it's usually fine. Papers and journals might be able to able to accommodate it. So whatever is easier for you might be my answer.
I mean, just to add to that, what I do
Yeah,
is,
maybe Sana can answer. Yeah.
I mean, Kashf has already done a session on software, so reference management. But what I do is, I do use the Zotero, and because it's easier, you simply have to give the instruction to change it from Chicago to AP, or to Howard style, and it automatically does that. But that's just, of course, that's doing it for you, but it's not a very foolproof way. Sometimes even software systems make mistakes, and I think that's when the editor
Yeah.
should,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. I think journal editors are there to
yeah, to guide us
start
and
to.
just, yeah, point this out. Nicole, the next question from Nicole. I hope Sujini answers been question has been answered. Nicole asks, "Hi, I have a question. What role does networking or mentorship in writing and publishing articles play?" So one is networking, the other is mentorship. Interesting questions. Go ahead, Jasmine.
I think again, I think Sana would be able to answer that question, but I'm just saying, see, of course, networking and mentorship, or it's very important in writing because it's always nice to have another reader go through it, especially somebody who might know intricacies better, somebody who might be able to evaluate your work from an academic viewpoint. So it's always good for any piece of writing to be read by a second person, read by somebody who is more knowledgeable in it. So yes, so mentorship in terms of helping through your writing process, weeding out what doesn't work, what works, all of that mentorship plays an important role. Um, yeah, in terms of the end publishing decisions, I'm not sure how much, because especially when it comes to like research papers, it goes through a very strict peer review process, also a blind peer review process it goes through. So that's a different thing. But of course, writing, I think mentorship and support from others plays a huge role in, crafting your writing in a better manner.
Right. I mean, yeah, of course, mentorship, as if we take mentorship to be feedback, we're showing a paper, discussing ideas with someone who's more
Yeah,
knowledgeable,
exactly.
expert, then it definitely helps. But networking per se, if by networking we understand, just because we know people in a network and they'll help us get published, I am not pretty sure that that's
Yeah,
something. If it's a good journal, it'll be blind peer review, and you will not really know who the people
yeah,
are doing it. And
yeah, absolutely. That's the thing.
yeah,
She's answered it.
sure, editor can't help with that process. All right. Next question quickly, Monica. If one's article draws on works published previously in the same journal, is it seen favorably as enhancing discussion? In terms of drawing upon an article, is too heavy reliance on any single already published work judged unfavorably?
Yeah, I think this is an important question, which again, so it is, I think I can speak for from my experience at EPW, which the notes contributors in EPW, which is available online, says it's best to avoid heavy self-referencing. So this is something you might want to keep in mind. Again, different journals may have different policies, but heavily relying on your own papers. Also, if the citations, if your reference list contains, like, there are a lot of researchers and like big researchers. I mean, a lot of us may be young researchers, but big researchers who go on and cite most of the papers in their references are papers written by themselves, which always is looked down upon. Um, yes, you can draw on works that are previously published, but I think it's good to tread with caution in terms of relying on them too heavily. You can reference them, you can rely on them, and also other papers, but yeah, not perhaps not too heavily.
Right. I hope, Monica, that answers your question. Next is, so if reviewers' comment is given, is it a positive sign that the article will be accepted? Nothing is.
It, it's not a sign that the article will be accepted. The will be accepted part depends upon whether the revisions are satisfactory. So yes, it's a positive sign in the fact that the journal is willing to engage with your article and it sees some potential in your article, but some problems that they're thinking that can be rectified. So no major overall problems that need rejection, but some issues with the article nonetheless that, if rectified, can make the article publishable. So whether the article will finally be accepted depends upon whether your revisions are satisfactory.
I hope that kind of answers this question. Um, Next question is from Vijay. Should we target should we target the journal first and then we should start writing for it, or should we write first and then find a journal? Very common.
Uh, I'm uh, Again, I also perhaps think Sarah answer this better because she's also doing. I'm sure she's writing papers while doing it. But I think maybe what I would do maybe as a writer would be, so again, so this depends. Okay, so if you're writing a research paper, I think it's always best to write your paper and then find out journals that are best for your paper, because it's a research work. It's a major work that you're doing. It's a paper which has value on its own as a piece of research. So you should do that work first and then target multiple journals that might be able to publish yours. But say, for example, if it's articles, you might be able to target a particular space as best for a particular article that you want to say. So then maybe you can think of, oh, I want to publish this particular commentary in EPW, and then maybe you can write a commentary. That's particularly fine. That's absolutely fine. But in terms of papers, I wouldn't recommend I'm looking at the journal and then writing a paper. But yeah, that is what I feel.
Yeah, I mean, if you can also add to this, because I've received few questions in the personal DMs as well.
Yeah.
Um, uh, can you, I mean, talk a little about how to perhaps select a journal? Because now the selection of journal, the question
Mm.
has come up. So how do we really go about if I've decided, okay, I'm writing this, I have written a piece, and how to select a journal? Either ways, even if I'm selecting before writing, how does one really go about this selection? Because we really don't have a centralized catalog, right? Or some database to go and take us through. Um,
Yeah, I don't know, I think UGC, for instance, has a particular, I think, certain kind of ranking system of journals, and where you have a Scopus indexed um, system. So I think a lot of people, what they do is usually target kind of high impact factor journals and Scopus indexed, where you can get a better points. I think maybe the way to go about targeting journals would, one, of course, look at whether the journal has published similar articles, or does your work cater to the journal, would be an important question, I feel. um So once you have an idea of that, maybe you can shortlist a couple of journals to whom your work will speak. So every journal might not be interested in your topic, obviously. So figuring out some of those based on, say, rankings or where. So another one would be to look at where people you are referencing, where are they publishing? Where have they published their articles? And would be a good uh, way to figure out which journals publish in your topic. But I think those would be two considerations I can think of. And maybe in terms of time also, if you are, say, for instance, if you have certain, time limits, say you want it published within a certain period of time for you to get benefits of your work or your PhD or whatever, then that those time considerations may also matter. So some journals are more slower than others, some are faster. So you want to put in those time considerations as well. Then again, readership, again, if it matters for you, sometimes certain topics, I mean, there are certain professors who write on certain topics for EPW because they want a larger readership than, say, another journal, which might be restricted to a more academic audience. So, readership, again, whom are you targeting as your audience for your article would also be important. But I think, again, if you're at a younger stage of research, maybe it might be a less important question. But again, still, yeah, I think those are some of the things I can think of.
But good you mentioned impact factor. One of the questions that I received also was an impact factor. Like what is impact factor and what are these metrics and why are they important?
Um, Now, so impact factor generally means it's a metric that has been developed in order to, it's actually a journal ranking system where a higher impact factor may be associated with more importance in your academic field. So I mean, by way of, again, I'm not sure of the intricacies of how PhDs rank publications in terms of, where I think some systems have priority for uh, getting published in certain
Mhm.
journals with higher impact factor. So I think, again, journals' impact factors are also presented on their websites. Or maybe you can do an online search and figure out what the impact factors or high ranking journals are. And if you want to target those, you can. I mean, it might not mean a lot in the end, honestly. I mean, it's just a metric after all, and it's based on probably, how many of top researchers are publishing, how well is it cited, how well is it read, and all of that. So it's a metric at the end of the day, but sometimes it might be important, particularly in terms of like your PhD or in terms of your work. So there it might become a consideration for you, but otherwise it wouldn't mean a lot.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. Next question is some journals ask for research note. For example, a
Mm.
1,000 word research note in a 4,000 word paper. What does it mean?
Um, I'm actually not sure of this. I mean, I did not understand it well enough also.
Right.
Uh, it might be a, I mean, would you want to elaborate? Somebody, the person who's asked the question, do you want to elaborate on what a research note is? I mean, I cannot understand what the category is.
Vishnupriya, if you can unmute yourself and just elaborate on what you really have in mind when you say research note, if you're with us still. Yeah.
Hi, ma'am. Um,
Right.
yes, I couldn't understand that was the question. I mean, there's a journal, I forgot now. So they were asking for 4,000 word paper, and there was a very specific line saying that research note should not be more than 1,000. So that was confusing. That's why I asked, what is it and what are we supposed to write in that research note?
Okay. Uh, Perhaps I think it would be best to check what that particular journal is saying. Maybe there's some detail on their website. For instance, like, or maybe, I mean, I what I can guess, I mean, this is purely a guess also, so that uh, it's maybe a short note on the kind of work that you're, I mean, of any notes, side notes that you want to provide on a paper. But if anybody else from the audience also, but I'm just guessing. So this is not something that you should take. So maybe you want to check the journal's website better, and figure out what it is.
Okay, ma'am.
Because with papers that I have worked with, yeah, there aren't separate research note.
Yeah,
But if anybody else in the audience can also answer, that would also be.
usually, Jasmine, you're right. Websites specify different terms that they use and what they exactly mean. But a basic
Yeah.
Google tells you, and I don't know if you can elaborate on this or if this gives you any hint, but a basic Google says that a research note is a manuscript that primarily provides empirical examples of theory-based research or methods. So, in comparison to a full article, the research note briefly directs the reader to applicable theory that underlies the research or the method. If that says anything. Are you also trying to look it up, Jasmine?
No, I'm not. I'm just reading. But yeah, I think it's Vishnupriya, I think it's best to again just search through the website of the journal that you're trying. There might be some information somewhere, or worst case, if you're not finding that information, always mail the editor of the journal or mail the team and confirm with them what their what this means, or what this exactly means in terms of writing. You can always mail them and ask.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
That definitely helps. All right, we have a lot of questions. Jasmine, I don't know how we're going to wrap this around these, but it's interesting. I'm glad these questions are coming up. Often confusing queries that we all have at some point. Thank you for organizing this useful session and interesting discussion. Thank you so much. My question is, what exactly are the differences between commentary, special articles, debates, especially for EPW? Of course, here Jasmine, who will tell you. Often I find all section pieces following the same styles using both data, debate, critique, or with see even postscript section or engage also includes what goes in commentary special articles section. If you can elaborate.
No, that's that's a very important, a very interesting question. But yeah, I think there are a lot of overlaps in terms of content. General basic idea is, and I mean, it's a good observation that Postscript also has a commentary type articles, which is something we're working on. But yeah, so basic difference would be special articles are research papers, 7,000 or 8,000 word full-fledged papers. The other categories of articles, so commentaries, I think the other categories then are perspectives, insight, and notes. So notes is a shorter research paper. Again, presents evidence, presents new arguments, but it's not 7,000 words. It might be 5,000 words. So this might also be, where you can present survey evidence and all of that, or some shorter notes section. Now, commentary mostly on topical issues or even scholarly debates also feature in commentaries. Perspectives and insight mostly are commentaries themselves, but generally a little more in depth, also longer, and may provide more insights into a particular issue, or more perspectives, new perspectives on a particular issue. But yes, so these are overlapping categories basically. Often these are also based on word limits. But yeah, generally perspectives and insights has a little more of analytical depth than a commentary, and special articles are research papers. Engage has its own separate way of functioning. Engage presents its own articles that's completely online. And Postscript, yes, so Postscript, the idea of Postscript is a short 1,000-word light-hearted piece. Usually people send in book reviews, movie reviews, other cultural pieces, other, even as you said, like shorter commentary type articles also come in. But yeah, so there's a lot of overlap, but this is the general idea.
I hope that answers the question. Um, okay, that's a DM. Thank you, Sana, for organizing this webinar. Found it useful. Great. Many compliments for you, Jasmine. Thank you for the wonderful session. Welcome. I have a question regarding publishing my PhD thesis work in a research paper. I am struggling because my fieldwork was conducted during the pandemic and I had to limit my context based on accessibility. Now I feel there are methodological issues. I'm feeling lost and unsure about how to write research paper on the same work.
Okay, I think again, I don't know if I'm the best person to answer this, but perhaps Sana can also Sana would also be better fit to answer this because she's also doing a PhD and can understand better than me, perhaps. But maybe getting some help from your colleagues or other people you can approach just to maybe start getting on the writing process. And often it's all kinds of writing, academic or even non-academic, creative, whatever writing. It's, I think, always best to just start writing and then go through the editing process. Um, Even if you're writing bad, just write and then edit it would be one thing to do. And maybe when you go through the writing process, you'll be able to figure out a bit better and also talk, seek feedback from others around you who might be able to help. But yeah, maybe if you're able to just start writing. And in fact, if there are methodological issues, maybe you want to discuss it with your supervisor and figure out what is the best course of action, and if you'll be able to do other kinds of work on the data that you already have, or if if you need to modify. But yeah, I think these are questions that you might want to discuss as part of your PhD note. But
Mhm.
yeah, that's what I
Yeah,
can say.
I mean, I see two possibilities here. One is
Yeah.
that you go forward with the publishing, but give in the methodology, mention it very honestly that the limitations arise on part of the COVID. The pandemic obviously made it difficult for a lot of us to do research, and that is acceptable. And then leave it to the journal to decide. The other is if you feel it's not really, it cannot really hold your work together, the methodological issues. Then, as Jasmine said, one is to explore what are the alternative methodologies available to you to supplement your work already done, the existing work which you've already done. That's one. The other is to follow the same methodology and conduct the exercise over and again to see if there are any divergences or any new additions that come up from the field. Two things will happen. Either it'll improve over the work already done, or it'll contradict that, which means then the previous work had some methodological flaws which you possibly cannot go forward with. Either ways, if it adds to it, or if it kind of validates your work, that's great. If it doesn't, then you'll have to think of further methodological branching. But that's something which obviously, as Jasmine said, should be discussed with your supervisor or your immediate advisors, is my advice. All right. Thanks for this informative session. How much time does EPW take to publish? I don't know the answer, Jasmine. Please enlighten us.
Uh, so ideally, so the average it takes is 6 months. It may take more than that also. It may take less than that as well. So sometimes if it's topical or something on an issue that's ongoing, then they might publish it sooner. But yes, there is a waiting period. So if you go to the website, so all the information regarding EPW's publishing is available on EPW's website under notes for contributors. So if you check there, you can know the timeline, what the process is, what article categories are, all kinds of details are there. You can also track online your article status and all of that. So yeah, you can check out the website, but yes, there is a waiting time to it.
Yeah, definitely is. There's one question in the DM. Could you also discuss a bit about the procedure followed with respect to an article received by the journal? Once an article meets the baseline of analysis and argumentation, how does journal deal with the subjectivity of the peer review process? So maybe you can take the first part first, which is the procedure followed once I know you confirm the receipt of the article, and then the subjectivity is a very difficult philosophical question, but okay.
I don't know how much information. I mean, I don't know if I have access to all of the information to, authoritatively say this, and I don't know how much I can say also. But yeah, so I work as a, so of course, so the once a paper is received, like most journals, there's a, I think, preliminary assessment. So some articles may be summarily rejected based on a preliminary assessment. Some are assigned to reviewers. Some go to a peer review process, and then it might again come back to the editors who go through the peer review itself and check if all is in order. And then so all reviews again go through the editor, who then decides to send the review to respective authors. And yes, so once one peer review is done, revisions are requested if the if the reviewer has suggested it, and then it comes back after revisions, and then another review round. There might be up to 3 review rounds for an article. Yeah, but that is almost as much as I know in EPW, and as much as I can say about the process of.
No, but thank you so much for taking up that question. Are there any further questions? Because I don't see any more questions.
There's one that came to me in direct message. I'm just going to read this out. In some economics journals, the research problem is only 2 to 3 lines without much context. How much detail should a problem statement have to be considered robust? So again, so it depends upon what the problem statement is and what the context that you are setting is also. So sometimes, again, as you've rightly observed that in a lot of economics journals, in papers, you might observe that the initial context setting is limited. They might jump directly into the methodology and more into the results, which is also acceptable these days in a lot of journals. But it so honestly, it depends upon the demand of your particular paper. In the sense, is that much context setting enough for you to make that argument? If it's enough, it might work. But if the reader, when they go through your paper, feels that, I'm not understanding this part, how do I make sense of this? Or, this has not been elaborated properly. I don't know why this person is looking into this question. What is it, the new thing that they're doing? If the reader has to question this when they're reading your paper, then you might need to do more context setting, more engagement with the literature, more engagement with research, more engagement with theoretical frameworks and all that. But yeah, so if some things might be self-explanatory, so it depends upon your paper and what its particular demands are, honestly. So problem statements, that's also it also depends upon the problem, right? Sometimes some problems are obvious. They might not need a lot of context setting, but some problem statements might themselves be more complicated. You want to understand the nuances of it better. So it is also a judgment you might want to take. And even then, so even if your problem statement is a little less, but your paper is valid, it is robust, and then you send it to a journal, they might send back saying, if they feel that you need to do more context setting, they might just send you a review saying, just revise this part. So as long as you're able to convey it overall, your paper is able to stand on its own, it should be fine, is the general idea of how it works. But yeah, again, even if there are problems, if they appear as minor problems, journals might be willing to consider your paper.
Right. Are there any further questions in the audience? If yes, you can unmute and ask, because I don't see any questions in the chat box anymore, which is a cue for us to wrap up. although we've obviously exceeded the time. But that, yeah.
Sorry for exceeding it.
No, I don't think it's on you. I think the questions, yeah, just people just had a lot of questions to ask, which is a good thing, because there's always this cloud around, publishing and what to do, what not to do, what can we really do to get it right in the first go. There's also a source of anxiety sometimes of people. So with that, I am expected to do the closing remarks. Um, as I've already said, if you have anything you'd like to follow up or ask later, please do email us at contact@kashfinitiative.com. I've signposted the links in the chat box for you to have a look at. If you want to hear more about the updates, about the events that we do, please subscribe to our mailing list through the link given. That is the best way we can assure that all the updates reach to you timely. You can also follow us on social media for more updates. And if you like the work we do, we do request you to give the team a shout out on social media. There's a lot of effort which goes behind the scenes to make things possible. We're excited to especially share that our next session we'll be doing a session in Marathi on research. Our details will be coming out soon. We are also doing a session on the use of AI in research scheduled for September, so do watch out for that. And if there's any topic you would like us to cover, please write to us, and we're always eager to bring that to you. Before we wrap up, it is the appropriate time that I thank the speaker for today's session, Jasmin, for being with us, for agreeing to do this. I mean, of course, you would not know the impact of how much this really means for people who join with us from different parts of the world. And it really does definitely encourage and mean a lot for us as well. For you, might be just like 2 hours, which is, I understand, a big deal out of your schedule, but it goes a long way for people joining from different parts of the country.
No, but thank you so much, Sana, and thank you to the Kashf Initiative for doing this session and for asking me also. I mean, I hope this was useful at least to get like a few points, which I also felt some things are a bit absurd, but again, I hope there are some few takeaways for those who listen. Thanks so much to Sana and Kashf and to the audience as well.
Thank you so much, Jasmin. A heartfelt thanks obviously goes to the Kashf team for making today possible, and of course to our lovely audience who's time and again engaged with us in great numbers. I understand it's Raksha Bandhan, but still people have shown up. Thank you for that, and have stayed with us till the end of this session. We'll soon send a feedback form to all of you through emails. Please take a couple of minutes to fill that in so that we can know what we're doing right, and that helps us improve. With that, we've come to the close of this session. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and keep pushing the boundaries of what research can really look like. Thank you all of you for being with us today. Bye-bye.